right. Well, welcome to P.S. I Love You, Writing Romance. I'm Libby Klein, and I have some amazing romance authors with me today. A romance novel at its core is about one thing. Two people fall in love and live happily ever after. But how we get there is deliciously different with every story, something the authors on this panel are very passionate about. So first we have award-winning author Allie Marie, who is a retired chief of police from local law enforcement, only to move into international law enforcement overseas as a commanding police officer, which sounds fabulous. Allie began writing mysteries inspired by the colonial ancestors she discovered while researching her family tree. So each book in her True Colors series has a touch of paranormal, history, and mystery with a little romance sprinkled in. So Allie, since we're talking about all things romance today, what to you makes a romantic meal?
A romantic meal. Wow, that's a good surprise. You know, I don't know if it's the food so much as if you're with the one you love, and you can be romantic anywhere, and it's just how good the food is, kind of is how good your partner is. So that's kind of my first surprise my answer.
Well, we have a rule in my house. If we're having garlic, we both have to have at least one bite.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree. Ranch dressing is our rule.
Oh, there you go.
If one has ranch, the other has to have the ranch.
Very smart.
Stay with his garlic and onions, someone said, yeah.
Very smart. Nancy Naigle, how about you? Nancy is a USA Today best-selling author of contemporary romance, including the Adams Grove, Boot Creek, and Christmas in Evergreen series. Several of her novels have been adapted to the television screen, airing on the Hallmark Channel and on Hallmark Movies and Mysteries, including the popular Christmas Joy and Hope at Christmas. Nancy, what to you makes a romantic meal?
Wow. You know what? I think it makes me immediately think of Andrew cooking on the grill outside for me. When we're outside with nature, he's cooking, we're sipping a glass of wine maybe, and it's just us out there. I just love those nights the best.
Well, that does sound nice. Nan O'Berry, you have gotten to think about your answer. So
Yes.
Nan grew up listening to stories at her grandparents' feet. So it's not surprising that her love of a good story pushed her to begin writing her own tales for enjoyment. As these grew, she shared her historical perspectives about the heroes in her imagination, cowboys, lumberjacks, and the country they founded. So Nan, what is your romantic meal?
Actually, our romantic meal is spaghetti. My husband and I met over spaghetti dinner when I was a junior in high school. And so every Tuesday night is spaghetti night. So we have spaghetti, the tossed salad, and garlic bread. Yes, we do have to have that as well. It sort of grew when the children came along. Then we used to have theme nights, but spaghetti is our special dinner.
That sounds really good. So y'all know I'm Libby Klein, and I write the Poppy McAllister mysteries about a plus-sized middle-aged widow who returns to her hometown of Cape May, New Jersey, and then gets stuck up in a murder. All she wants to do is escape back home to Virginia before she runs into the one who got away. But just as things are heating up with her high school sweetheart, she meets sexy Italian barista Giampaolo, who becomes her calm in the storm. Nancy's newest release is a work of women's fiction titled The Shell Collector. So Nancy, I have two very sexy men in my series who make up a lot of the romance for me. How about you? The early reviews for The Shell Collector are absolutely fabulous, but I want to hear a little bit more about the romance.
Oh, thank you. I am so excited about this story. I cannot wait for people to read it. It's a story of loss and love and friendship, and oh, wow. Paul, who is the hero in this story, is such a great character. He's an ex-Marine, and he is working hard to reunite military working dogs with their original handlers, and is bringing those old like Kmart's and Walmart's and Lowe's that are just sitting there going to waste on the side of the road. And they call them ghost boxes. Well, he is taking those and repurposing them into these rehabilitation and kennel facilities for animals. So he's just a hero in so many ways, not just for Amanda. I can't wait for people to read about him. He's pretty special and handsome.
Well, so far it sounds fabulous. And I mean, the early reviews are just raving about it. So I can't wait to read it.
Thank you so much. It's really a beautiful story.
Now, Allie, I would love to know how you're getting mystery, romance, and paranormal all in your romantic suspense series, True Colors. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I knew because of the way the storyline was in my head that I wanted there to be a romance between the characters, obviously, but that was also my first book and everybody encouraged a romantic element to it. But my story is more of the mystery and the history with that romantic element, giving everybody that aha moment when it's the right time. So it's hard sometimes. I feel like I'm juggling all of these things and I'm hoping that I wrap up the loose ends. But it's going on the journey with the characters through the mystery that I think helps them grow and helps the reader grow with them, because they either want to be the character or be with them. And that's the flavor that I'm trying to present with it. And this head's so full of stuff anyway that it just, I have to have all these things going on in a story.
Well, and then Allie, your reviews are also just as gorgeous. People clearly adore your series. So it definitely is something that I've put on my TBR list for sure.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
Now, Nan,
Yes.
you write sweet romance in the Pioneer Bride series
Yes, ma'am.
and the Blue Bonnet Bride series.
Right.
So I'm just fascinated by this. I mean, I think that obviously there's going to be weddings, right? Because they're brides.
Obviously, yes.
So tell us about the series.
The Blue Bonnet Brides is a little bit of action, adventure, and romance. It is a story of 4 Texas Rangers who are trying to stop a madman from taking over Texas. I have gotten 2 books written on Texas Proud and Texas Born, and I'm working on the 3rd one now. And this is where the villain is caught. I won't tell you how, but the person who is in charge of the Rangers, he has fallen in love with Tyrone Dixon's sister, Elizabeth, and they're about to get married, and she's kidnapped at her wedding by the diabolical madman, whose thought is to do away with Texas and create his own empire. And I kind of stumbled on this doing a history, trying to find out why, Cinco de Mayo was going on. And it was a Maximilian plot with Napoleon to take over America, to actually take over Texas all the way to the California border. And it's sort of a mesh between the Wild Wild West and a Hallmark series such as what Nancy writes. So it's been very interesting to write. And my characters range from the typical American hero to Joaquin Balboa de Montaña, who is Mexican born. So it's sort of a mash of everything. Now with the Pioneer Brides of Rattlesnake Ridge, and I really hate saying the snake name because I'm terrified of snakes. This is mail order brides. She is from Virginia, and it's just after the war, so she reads the order for the man seeking a wife, and she goes out there. Unbeknownst to her, it was not the actual person that wrote for her. It was cowboys that were being worked too hard. They figured if they gave the boss something to do other than work, he would give them some time off. Well, by the time she gets out there, the boss is married. So they're hiding her on another ranch to figure out what to do. And of course, she falls in love with a gentleman that's supposed to be protecting her. So they do all end in marriage, but it's sort of an adventure. It's sort of a mystery on how they get there. So it's a lot of fun to write. So, I figure if you're going to go, throw a wide loop and just go in there.
That's such a clever idea that they weren't actually looking for a bride themselves. They were trying to hook up the boss. How
Yeah.
that?
I mean, you know, it's a sort of a Cyrano de Bergerac type of thing.
Yeah, awesome.
Uh,
So y'all out there watching us, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat at any time. I'm going to do my best to keep an eye on it and to be able to pepper in your questions to the authors as soon as we have a chance. Now, if y'all aren't familiar with the romance genre, there's a lot of different shades of romance within the genre and across all genres. In fact, every author on the panel today writes a different flavor of romance. Allie writes romantic suspense with a paranormal twist. And Nan writes sweet romance. Nancy, I believe, writes a little bit more of a traditional romance. And I secretly write chick lit. And I cleverly disguise it as a cozy mystery with a side of romance and humor. Because my books are cozy, there will never be any sex in them, but you can't say they aren't sexy. Everyone enjoys something different. So my personal feeling for what I like to read and write is that witty banter and sexual tension are sexier than the mechanics of sex. And I have a lot of both of those things. So I'd like to hear from the different ladies. How are the different subgenres that you're in? How do they affect the writing and the stories? What are the elements of the romantic suspense? Allie, how does that come into the writing?
Well, for me, it's a little bit tricky because I don't want the romance to take over the history and mystery of the novel. So I think I've tended to become a little more fade to the scene as I'm writing the story. It was a little spicy in the beginning. Now, even spicy as I say my novels are 2 shades of gray because I don't really get into heavy duty activities and romance. I mean, yeah, you know what's going on and you're right there with them, but it gets out at the right time. And that's gotten a little more true to the, as the series goes on. So I want my 2 main characters to always have their, you know, eventually a happy ever after. And some of them have a difficult path to get to it, and others there's like in the first one, they fall in love right away because that's what I wanted for that couple. And then others have to knock their heads to fall in love. So it changes with each one. So I want everybody to like the characters for the way that their romance is displayed and comes out, but how they solve the mystery or how they get involved. It's not necessarily solving a mystery as much as maybe putting the spirits to rest, since mine have ghost and paranormal to it. So it's a trick to do it though, to not get too carried away with the romance. And I don't know if the other ladies have that because of the way that their romances do go.
What do you think? How does yours get carried away? How is sweet romance different than traditional romance?
Well, we hinge on the touches, the looks, maybe the chase kiss, maybe the kiss that lingers just a little too long. But there are words, there's a bonding that grows between the hero and the heroine, especially when they're pressed and with adventure or with some type of climatic part. There's that need for someone to be with you, to share this event or to rescue you from this event. So there's a lot with sweet romance that goes on. You know that you can come to a certain point and you can close the door. As you say, the mechanics kind of mess up the ink work there. And sometimes, I mean, how many of us have watched those great old black and white movies? And Claudine Colbert and Clark Gable, all you had to hear was that horn blow at the end of It Happened One Night, and you knew that blanket was dropped. You didn't have to know what was going on. You just had to take a deep breath and go, wow, wish that was me. That's the type of thing I want to get across. You know, my hero may kiss the horse before he kisses the girl, but it is that bond. They forge that bond. You know that there's something going on between them before they even start. And it might be an immediate thing. or it might be something that is built upon. Ty and Lily. Lily had no idea Ty was falling in love with her. She had been in an abusive relationship before. So Ty's soft, I mean, he almost had to become the wife whisperer instead of the horse whisperer. He had to encourage her to relax, to, we can do this, we can save your ranch type thing. And it's a bonding thing. And I think all of us do that, whether it's intentional or unintentional, because that's the way we cope with life. We need to see that realism, even though we're using romanticism to get the story across.
It's so funny that you bring up old movies because I love old movies. But one of the things that I find, I guess, frustrating is in an old movie, it's like an hour and 40 minutes of fight. And then a massive kiss at the end. I love you, darling. You'll marry me, won't you? Of course I'll marry you. And I'm like, based on what? But then in a romance novel, there's such a great buildup so that when you have the kiss, when you have the end, they're like, oh no, I totally see how we got there with this. And that's more of what you write, I believe, Nancy Naigle, where you have a variety of different kinds of romance because you have several series. And I want to hear how does the romance differ in your series? And also, what is it like writing romance for the Hallmark Channel, where it's more of, it's over when they kiss at the end?
Well, I mean, I like to say I write small town love stories, not necessarily romance. And, I don't know that it's the genres so much that have shifted some of the romantic style of my writing as it has been just my maturity in writing. The first series I ever wrote was the Adams Grove series. Sweet Tea and Secrets was the first book. And they were romantic mysteries. They were small town stories with love and a little suspense in every story. And I was shoving a lot of stuff in those books, boy. And some of that was just my naivety about how to weave a story, right, and keep you hooked in. But in those stories, there was an expectation that there would be some, loving on the pages. Now, my doors weren't completely closed, but you weren't seeing any action either, but you were hearing a lot of it. And my second series, Boot Creek, was really kind of sexy for me. Now, when you're reading romance and you go to erotica and stuff like that, my stuff was sexy light. But for me, it felt like I was writing some really sexy stuff. But after that, I started working on the Christmas books for St. Martin's Press and writing for Hallmark. And I've really found kind of my voice and my place. And so my stories are shelved under Clean and Wholesome now. And it's okay if I leave out the love scene altogether. And that's kind of nice because then you can make it up for yourself. And it can be as sexy as you like in your head, but I don't have to write it out. And I've really kind of enjoyed that because it was a lot of pressure. I mean, I remember I shared this with you, Libby, I know before, where I had turned in one of my novels, and I'm thinking it was the second Boot Creek novel. And, it was the time, for something to happen. And I turned in that draft. And when I got it back from my editor, she was like, did you leave out a whole chapter? Did you mean to just slam the door in our faces? And I was like, I was hoping I could get away with it. Obviously, I didn't succeed. I think too that the stories sometimes just really call for something sexier or something more friendly. Reunion romances, your folks have known each other longer, so a lot of the stuff can kind of fast forward, and I just kind of let the stories take me where they need to. Writing for Hallmark, of course, that almost kiss. There is no formula for Hallmark. I've heard people say that a million times, but really, believe it or not, there is not a formula. You just want to write a good story, but something that in the past has always been pretty clean and wholesome. And of course, some of that's changing with the times now, as we've seen on some of the new movies. So.
Well, those of us who love romance and romance novels know that romance gets a bad rap. It is universally desired in every human being. We all want to be loved. We just don't want to admit that we read about it. And if social media is to be believed, no one reads romance except for one bored housewife in the Midwest who manages to single-handedly spend $1 billion a year and buys 40% of the books on the market. Some of the morally averse to the genre don't even realize that while they're waiting to see if the bus explodes, or the airplane lands safely, or the international drug ring is caught. Somewhere in those plots, a sneaky romance has worked its way in, and you've also been waiting to see if the hero gets the girl. So let's talk about some of the misconceptions of the romance genre and how have each of you broken those stereotypes? Now, go ahead and jump in. What do you all think? Allie,
Can
go
I
ahead.
start? Do you want me
Go
to?
ahead, Allie.
Okay. If you looked at the cover of my first book, it's the only one that has the couple on it. And it happens that I wanted it because my firefighter hero is actually a hometown, I used a real fire department and I actually had to use the coat to get him on the thing. This cover scared so many of my male readers because they did not want to read the paperback with that on the cover. And I asked why, and they said, because it's a man and a woman. So the other ones, as the covers evolved, they became, well, you can't see it so well, but it's the ghosts making the appearance like this one, because I didn't want to scare off potential readers. And about 25% of my reviews on Amazon were done by men. And they almost always began with, this is not my usual genre, but, and then they would say, I got into the story or the history or whatever it was that caused them. So I'm tending to shy away from the man and the woman on the covers of my True Colors and the spin-off series, which will be the True Spirits, because I don't want the misconception, and because it is, again, minus romantic elements, so it's not a full romance story. So I'm trying to keep the covers a little less scary to the guys.
Well, and I think that's a great point too. I mean, you got to know your audience. And, for my stories, they tend to skew a little bit older for women, and so, yeah, I think knowing your audience is so important. And I think it's been interesting that in doing book signings at the Hallmark stores, how many men really are reading romance. So I don't know if they're just being more open about it, or it just happens to be, in that situation, I'm hearing about it, but it's nice to hear that other people are hearing that as well. So, I think everybody's looking for a good read these days.
Yes, exactly. And with Westerns, you most likely think it's a man's Western, but as it comes, women had to be there somewhere, whether we were behind the bar or whether we were in the schoolhouse, women were there. And it's odd enough that if you go back and look at history, it was the women that owned the saloons. They were the one that had the town's purses. They were the ones that brought in the churches, that brought in the education. So they had the money to afford all these things. So it was really quite interesting. So breaking the mold, I think, is sometimes showing how strong women can be. And that makes it a difference in the romance, by just showing the strength of a woman, the grit of a woman, and in some cases.
Well, one of the stereotypes that I'm dealing with is the love triangle. Love triangles are usually gratuitous obstacles that go on forever. And while there are examples out there of 20 book long love triangles where the woman just can't figure out what she wants, and the men seem to be content to just dangle on the line forever.
So patient. Like, who ever met a man that patient?
And they're all friends. They're all friends. So I have flipped the stereotype. I've hoped that my readers will permit me and go along with me. But Poppy has made some life-changing mistakes in her past that altered the course of her relationships. So when she returns home to Cape May, she has the opportunity to kindle her old romance with her high school sweetheart. Only she met a sexy Italian barista who became her calm in the storm, her best friend who she could go to and talk about anything. So here she is after all this time, and her past has caught up with her, and darn if she isn't facing the same decision again. She's paralyzed with making a wrong choice. So she's had an entire story arc about her choices and about what she's had to do. Only my readers have started deducting stars from my reviews because it's gone on for the long, long time of 4 books. And I'm like, guys, give me a chance. So the romance love triangle starts at the end of book 1, and spoiler alert, it concludes in book 5. But I flipped it in some ways because, first of all, it was never about the tension of how can I add some tension in here and like force you to, be interested. It was all about her inner struggle. And after she makes the decision, it doesn't go well. They don't all remain friends and go gently into the night. There is some real world fallout coming in book 6. So I'm excited for y'all to see that. And I'm hoping that when people who tell me my reviews, because I don't read them, will start telling me, okay, well, this one doesn't say your deducted stars because the love triangle. So I'm like, well, thank God. It's 4 books. So, and then another stereotype that I have gone out of my way to break is that love is for the young and beautiful. Most of the heroines, especially in the old romance novels, are 20 years old, beautiful heiresses. The men have money. I mean, they're all young and gorgeous. And I have 3 very solid romances in my series. We've already talked about the one. Poppy's a plus size heroine, so she definitely breaks the mold of being young and beautiful. She's in her 40s. But there's another one with Aunt Ginny, who's in her 80s, who's rekindled a romance from her past. And there's a romance going on with my little handyman, who's a little bald, short, little 5 foot tall man, his nickname is Itty Bitty Smitty. So I've tried to break some of those stereotypes, and that we all fall in love, that love is for everyone. Everyone deserves to love and be loved. We've had a couple of questions come in. One is, how do you keep romance fresh across a series? I think that's a great question. Who wants to jump in with that?
I think it depends on your characters.
I could probably give a little bit of an, yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, your characters will sometimes dictate how much romance there is. Ty was a slow, silent type. Joaquin was very charismatic because of his Spanish or Mexican upbringing. Max was he was the type of fellow you would go next door and meet, So each one of them had their own specific way of dealing with love. But it dictates the time, the place, and the characters. I don't think I've ever written one where it was a love 'em and leave 'em type of guy, which may come in the in the future. But each person has their own characteristic. And if you're, making that little character trait of your characters, you're going to know about how they're going to go about this business. Whether it will be flowers like, just out of spur of the moment, or whether it's something totally different, something that's more about door holding and their hands gently touching and just the shiver of delight. Maybe you see something different in the eyes of the hero than he gives to another woman. So it to me, it's character driven. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I don't really concentrate on keeping the romance fresh, and if that's a mistake, y'all let me know. But I'm really concentrating on keeping my characters fresh. Right. And each of them is wanting and desiring something different or needing something different in their life. I mean, it's no different than, you and I, what I think is romantic and what you think is romantic may be very different, and for a lot of us, if the guy would just vacuum is very romantic. I think there's not a one size fits all. So I'm with you there, Nan. Characters for sure.
For mine, the lead characters change every time because it's the story of the descendants of 3 sisters. So each girl has a connection to the past and each other. So each one has their turn to be the main character, and their romantic interest is the main male character. And then they kind of step back to let the next couple be the lead, and the focus is on those with those little intermittent references back to the other couples. So it keeps everybody kind of like a family. So you know who you're dealing with for the main story, but you also want to know what's going on. Did they ever get married from the first book, or when are they getting married? So maybe there's a reference to their upcoming wedding, but it's not taking away from the others. So it kind of keeps the romance fresh, I think, because every couple that's coming forward has their story, their style. And I didn't know I could kind of adapt the writing to fit the mood of the moment, depending on what was going on. But I do think that helps to keep the romance fresh, but it's not the same old, or the same characters. Like sometimes can happen with when it's the series characters lead are the same ones in every single book. You know, you have to go kind of on a roller coaster ride, I think, with those characters to be able to keep it fresh, because it's our lives dictate that it's not always going to be that smooth ride. You have your ups and downs, so you would have to follow that, I think, in the story.
I know that's one of the things that I really like about writing a series, because I love romance novels, but with many of them, when you get to the end, you don't see those characters anymore. I love the romance novel series, like Allie's talking about, where the next book in the series, different characters, but the characters from the first book kind of have a little bit of a side appearance where you kind of see, you know, what they're doing, having babies, you know, getting along, maybe fighting a little. I love that. I love not saying goodbye. Yeah. It's one of the things that drew me to Cozy Mysteries, was that I didn't have to say goodbye. Now, how to keep a romance fresh if, you know, Lord willing, I get 20 book series. Right now I'm up to book 8. That's the one I've got to start on. That's going to be interesting. It's a challenge that I'm looking forward to seeing what I can do about changing the dynamic of the relationships to being more of a husband and wife, maybe one day, maybe partners in crime. There are some great series out there. One of my favorite is a little tiny Australian TV show called Mr. and Mrs. Murder, about crime scene cleanup technicians. It was fabulous. I was devastated that it was only a one season show. But I'd love to do something where the relationships develop into more of a partnership like that. So we'll see how much the publisher gives me to try and what I'm able to pull off. You guys have already answered the question in the chat about how do you know if it's a short story or novel. So that was fabulous. Brooke asked, who is the character inspiration for Paul? Now, I'll be honest, I don't know who Paul is. Who has a Paul? Okay, Nancy, that's on you, girl.
You know, there wasn't a man that inspired him at all. I mean, he was just kind of dreamed up. I don't really usually base any of my characters on real people. That book does have one person in there that was based on a real person, and it's just a little teeny role. And my husband had lost a worker, just a guy that had worked for him, and he had always teased me and asked me, "You're gonna put me in the book? You're gonna put me in the book, aren't you?" And I was like, "Sure." And he's like, "Well, don't call me Mike, call me Chase, because that's a really cool romancy name." I'm like, okay. And so I have a little guy named Chase in the book. And he's just in a few paragraphs, but that was a shout out to him. But for the most part, you know, I'm just drawing on what I think is interesting. And quite honestly, the only real Marine that I've always been close to is my Uncle Sonny. And so I guess maybe I'd have to say he'd be a shout out towards that guy. But it's just hero activity, I guess, that just pulls me in.
All right, so here's a question for my traditional romance authors, because with writing a cozy mystery, I never write a sex scene. I wouldn't even be allowed. Part of why I chose cozy, because nobody can ever come back and say, we really need more sex in here. And I'd be like, I don't want to do that. So now I know I'm not going to have to. Yeah. But for those of you, how many of you have had to write a sex scene? And what does your mother think about that? Who wants to answer?
Thank heavens my mother is dead.
Now that's not something you hear often.
My mama is quite alive, and I have had to write a few, and they're always very uncomfortable for me. And I remember and I think it was in Every Yesterday, and I think it's chapter 11. And my mom was like, whoa, girl, that is awesome. And then I don't think I've ever read it since. I think it embarrassed me so much that I've never read it since.
My mom read Harlequins. And so, one of these days I was picking up and looking behind her and I said, Mom, have you really read this story? And she goes, oh, I just skip over those parts.
That's what I do when I read. I skip over those
And
parts.
so, that was kind of laughter, because my mom, bless her heart, was the sweetest little thing on earth. But just imagining her reading some of those novels back in the early 70s, and I'm thinking that's when things were really starting to break out and stretch, and I would even have to go now, oh my goodness, is that what that means? So when I look at writing the sex scenes, I don't think I'm very good at it because it's something I do avoid writing. So I have had to write one or two, and I'm like, yep, glad it's over, glad it's done. And that's why, again, I think I write the sweet romance because it's something I don't feel comfortable writing. So, I know it would be a part I guess Mom would skip. So that would be a good thing.
The reason I chose to go mild was, I'm like Nan, I don't know if I could really get into that heavy duty, part A goes into slot B and all of that stuff. I'm not really interested in that because my focus is on other things. But I also still see many of my former colleagues, and a lot of us get together for breakfast. And I really wouldn't want them to have the book and wait till I left after breakfast and say, turn to page 49 and see what she wrote.
Talk about you.
And I do want my family to be able to read it and not have to, where they won't recommend it to anybody because something embarrassed them. So I tended to, it's just easier for me to keep it nice. And yes, they may argue, there may be the knocking of heads together as relationships are developing and working their way through their crisis and their, I can't think of conflict. You always have to have that conflict. I don't agree with that, but sometimes, you just put a conflict in there to make everybody happy. But, that's just the way I want it. I really want to be able to face the people that, because a lot of my books take place fairly close by. So I will see people who know what the areas I'm talking about, but I really don't want them to have I didn't know she could write that.
I also didn't want people who knew me to run into me with my husband and go, oh, did she make you practice that? So I was like,
they seem to always want to take credit for that no matter what anyway.
I was going to say, we're all three of us that I know, Nancy and Allie and I are all small town girls. So we do come in contact with some of the people that do know what we write. So it is a big concern, I guess you could put it that way, because you don't want to offend or go into church and have the minister look at you when he's making some pointed barb or something, So it's quite interesting,
Yeah, I can definitely see that it would be. I just said, I'm just going to avoid the whole thing altogether. So what is the most romantic gesture any of your characters have ever done?
Oh my gosh. Most romantic gesture.
So I think in Christmas Joy, Joy, the heroine in the story, had a Christmas ornament that her mother had given her. And of course, her mother has passed away. And when she is there with Ben, the hero in the book, that ornament gets broken.
Yeah.
And he not only sweeps it up, but at the end of the movie or the book, whichever, spoiler alert, he handcrafts an ornament for her that has pieces of that broken ornament in it. And
yes,
for me,
I remember
that was the most romantic thing ever. I mean, that somebody would, take the time to not only care and feel bad that something had happened, but then to handcraft something for me to help create that memory and draw it forward. That just stole my heart. I love that piece. It's my favorite part of the book, the movie, all of it.
For mine is the character, my heroine's love interest. His family is renowned for wrapping gifts that are not what you think they're going to be. And she should have known this, but she falls for it every time. And toward the end of the book, when he's he gives her a long box that has Mont Blanc pen on it, and she's thinking she's getting the nice pens, but when she opens it, that's where the engagement ring was.
Aww.
So it was like, she's surprised. She knows it's coming because of their close relationship, but didn't know when. And she's opening up thinking of this, and, you know, the little tears and all that stuff. So it's just, it's fun to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you. I love hearing everybody's side and take on what they put into the stories, because it helps.
Yeah.
So we do have a question if we're ready to move on.
Sure.
How do the authors play up the conflict and the fighting between the main couple if they include that in their books in a way that doesn't sour the ultimate union at the end? I mean, I put real world, you know, like not so much outwardly fighting so much as the what you're saying isn't really what you're saying. How about you guys?
In Texas Proud, Lily wants to retain her ranch, and Ty is trying to really protect her from being killed by the gambler. So he distances himself from her. He sort of pushes her away. And, you know, I know it's corny, but there's a scene where he's literally riding off and she's running beside the horse. And she's saying, I'm going to hate you. I'm going to hate you for the rest of your life. And, you know, he's riding faster. And then she just literally cannot keep up. And she stops and she goes, I love you. I love you. So it's a dramatic change, but it is that force where I'm trying to save you almost from yourself type thing. And so there's that inner conflict there that keeps that going and trying to straighten that out. But in the very end, of course, you know, she's proud, she's strong, her head is held high. She's not about to look at him when she rides through town. And of course, his buddies are there pushing him along. You know, you've got to make this right. You've got to make this right. So their proposal is sweet. And of course, you know, thank goodness there are Texas Rangers there, because they round up the preacher and then it's all done in a minute. But there's parts of it that is a personal characteristic. You know, from your, again, characterization, how they're going to fuss and fight with this. And it does keep it fresh. It does keep its strength without going to blows. Although I think Mary Kate did slap Joaquin once, but he deserved it. It was okay.
With I understand why you have to have conflict. You can't have everything so sugary sweet,
right?
And everything's always perfect, and every couple is perfect. You have to have that. I don't think the conflict has to always be between the man and the woman, or the two main characters. I think that let some of the outer situations cause the conflict. I tried to put a different conflict, if that's the right word, for each character, so nobody thinks that they're reading the same story over again. You know, we know it's boy meets girl, boy and girl have fight, boy and girl get together. So it's like, it's the sweet, they fell in love instantly in the first book because that fit the character in the title. In the second book, the character's heart was broken by the guy, and they're finding each other later in life, and they have to overcome their teenage angst to move further. And then the third one, the girl is, she's drop dead gorgeous and everybody else in the world loves her, but the guy she's interested in is a nerdy college professor who would, you know, has got his nose stuck in maps and old books and things like that. And her conflict, the way I played it up, is her trying to get his attention, you know, without taking everything off to get his attention. And they, you know, so that makes it fun for me as a writer. I'm not writing the same stuff every time.
Right.
And you can pull that from, you know, even relationships that, you know, all of these different categories and styles and things come from life around us.
Yeah, and I think too, you have to have a balance of internal and external conflict.
Yeah.
And I think too that you have to be careful that you don't have something that's just plain flat out unforgivable.
Right.
I kind of live my life by don't ever do anything that you can't undo. Yeah, I mean, like when you hear about the girl that, just went and ripped up her, the seats of his car or something, I'm like, oh my gosh, you can't do that. So I think kind of subconsciously my characters live by that same thing, because, if they do something just utterly forgivable, you're not going to get them back together.
Right.
There has to be a way to make amends. But yeah, I think that balancing external conflict and internal conflict is probably the best way to keep that fresh.
In the end, I want my readers to feel good about the book. Not necessarily, I mean, they'll go through the angst and all of the ups and downs and the trials with the characters, but I want them to feel good in the end that it's resolved, or, whether it's the happily for now or happily ever after or whatever. But in the end, I like to read for fun and to enjoy what I'm reading, not to be depressed by it.
One of the things that I have done in the first 5 books of my series is I have a character who some people have said is too good to be true. And they are, until the end. And then you're like, what have you done to me? So the very next book to come out has a lot of angst and a lot of conflict. And it was hard to write something that was very real and very between two people who are now really butting heads in a very big way, but yet do it in a cozy mystery way, because this isn't going to be, a movie of the week on Dateline where she shredded the car seats, right?
Right.
Because it's a cozy. So I've taken it, definitely it's a lot darker and it's a lot more frustrating between the characters, but it's done in a very cozy way. So we only have a couple minutes left. This is my only series. The Poppy McAllister series is the only thing I've ever written. I was very, very blessed that first book I wrote got an agent, got published. I'm in awe of all of you ladies with long careers and multiple series. So for your very last question, tell me about something that you've written, one of your series, one of your stories that we haven't talked about, something that we might not know about.
I do have a cozy mystery, and it's cloudy with a chance of murder. And I kill off the weatherman because evidently he does not give me enough snow. But he dies, and it's a husband and wife team. If you've ever seen Macmillan and Wife, it's very similar to that. So I have that going, and I need to write another one. The next one will be For Whom the Fry Tolls.
I'm actually branching it a little bit because my idea, especially with my past law enforcement career, to write, mysteries of, crimes and thrillers or whatever. But the genealogy bit took me on a different path. But I've got my first short story coming out in an anthology this year that I call Grape Minds Drink Alike. And it's part of the anthology is Murder by the Glass and has wine involved in it. And that's what happens in this one. And I also wrote my first fantasy short story for another anthology that I was really surprised that I could do fantasy with dragons and fairies and all the other little creatures that I can't even remember now, gnomes and things like that, because I just didn't think that was going to go that way. So I'm excited about that, to branch out a little bit. Keep my series are still my heart, because I have a 3-book trilogy that'll be a spinoff of the first one, and those are coming out, and then that'll clear that True Colors, True Spirit series, and then I'll look for something else in a series format, because I think people want to keep up with the characters.
Well, The Shell Collector that comes out in May is a beach book, but it's not my first beach book. The first beach story I wrote was a novella, and it was part of the Brenda Novak's box set that we raised money for diabetes research. And I loved that story, and it is actually going to start filming in April for Hallmark. So y'all will be able to see that on the Hallmark Channel, but it's very different from the books. It's almost like they're just taking the title, but stay tuned for it. It's a novella. It was was supposed to be a 10,000 word piece for that anthology, and it ended up about 40,000 words. So that book has had a great little life, and it all came out of for helping diabetes research.
Oh,
Yeah, never ask a Southerner to write short.
I know.
It takes a three-page syllabus just to give directions.
Yeah, exactly.
thank you guys so much for being on the panel. The authors have been fabulous, and thank you for everyone who's come to hear us. You guys have been a great audience, and for Katie for putting everything together, you've done a fabulous job. Thank you guys so much. We hope to see you all soon.
Thank
If we
you.
can-
And
if we
thank
don't
you,
get-
Libby. Thank you for doing
Thank you,
this
Libby,
Bye,
with
guys.
us.
Thank you all
Yeah.
for coming.
Thank you. And hopefully we'll get a chance to respond to everybody on those great comments and things
Yes,
like that.
yes.
But thanks again, Katie, Libby, and all of the guests.
Thanks. It's so good to see y'all. Can't wait to see you in person next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.